it's Reagan, and today I'm here to do a really exciting video in partnership with Harper Teen. That's right, in honor of Lauren Oliver's newest release, Broken Things, I'm gonna be recommending some really intense books that will keep you up all night, either because they're terrifying and you can't sleep, or because they're so intense that you can't put it down, or a combination of both. These recommendations are all inspired by Broken Things by Lauren Oliver, which is an intense thriller in itself. This is a story that centers around Mia and Bryn, who 5 years ago were accused of killing their other best friend, Summer, in the woods. They are a trio of best friends who 5 years ago become increasingly obsessed with a very popular book. The book is called The Way into Lovelorn, and their fan fiction imagining of the sequel leads them to become increasingly obsessed and pulled in by the dark magic of this book, and leads to the eventual accusations against the two remaining best friends after the death of Summer. But the thing is, the two girls didn't do it, even though the town thinks they did. But on the anniversary of Summer's death, a seemingly insignificant new piece of evidence surfaces, which kind of throws the whole investigation back into the limelight, resulting in both Mia and Bryn having to not only confront what happened in the woods all those years ago, but also kind of reconnect in ways they weren't expecting. This just sounds like the dark, intense thriller I always need in my life, especially in the fall season. And because of this, I'm so excited to share with you guys some really intense and exciting thrillers and novels that will keep you on the edge of your seat and keep you up all night as recommendations in this video. The first book I have to talk about is Neverwinter by Neil Gaiman. This is probably one of the scariest urban fantasy books I have read in a long while. This is a story setting around the concept of an in-between. This is set in London. Unbeknownst to everyone living on the surface, there is this underground London where people and things who kind of fall through the cracks, and they can never be seen literally by the people above ever again. Our main character falls through these cracks at the beginning of the story, and basically throughout the entire novel is fighting to be able to regain his life on the surface. This book is weirdly dark and whimsical, being that it is a fantasy novel, so you're kind of equally fascinated by all the weird places our main character has to basically discover and all of the strange characters he meets along the way. But at the same time, one of the perspectives of this novel are two of the scariest serial killers I feel like I have ever read in a fiction novel. They are just so completely unhinged and intensely terrifying that I just read it and I'm like, oh no. I would say this book is equal parts delightful and horrifying, which makes it such an interesting and unique read, and honestly perfect for fall. Next book I have to recommend is The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. This is a fantasy book I read last year and absolutely enjoy it, and is just the perfect book that will keep you up all night. This is a very, very dark fantasy set in 1902 New York, set in a world where essentially people have magical abilities, kind of like, think like X-Men abilities. However, they're completely ostracized by society and hunted down by very powerful people, both in the government and just in like the workforce. So because of this, they join together and oftentimes make gangs to survive. We follow our main character Esta, who actually exists within present day. However, she has been trained her whole life to utilize her magical powers and her magical abilities to actually travel in time. Her mentor essentially tells her she needs to go back in time to 1902 to steal this book to basically save the future of magicians everywhere. So she does this, she enters 1902, infiltrates this gang, and so begins the dark and intense story that this book is. There's something about this setting that is so captivating, this grimy New York atmosphere combined with this interesting time in history at this turn of the century where so much corruption and power exists within the government, and I just feel like Lisa Maxwell handles that so well. You read from so many different perspectives and characters, each just trying to survive, and it is just so intensely gripping you won't be able to put it down, and you'll find yourself reading it all night long. Not to mention, this does have some very dark and conniving characters that are quite creepy and quite messed up. That being said, The Last Magician is so good, and the sequel comes out soon anyway, which is also so good, so it's a perfect time to pick up this book. This wouldn't be a video talking about dark and intense novels if I didn't mention Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is one of my favorite books and I feel like I try to make everyone in the entire world read it, so I had to include it in this video as well. This is set in a world where essentially mankind has eradicated all things that can harm them, from famine to disease and even death itself. Therefore, the only way people can die is if an individual called a scythe is ordained to do so. They basically pick individuals in the populations with various different methods to glean. The story follows two of our main characters who have been selected to be scythe apprentices in hopes of becoming a scythe themselves. You would think that scythes, given the ultimate task of deciding who dies, would be humble and full of empathy, but that is not always the case, and the scythe world actually consists of a lot of different politics, some very dark and terrifying. This is a book that is so thrilling and full of so much mystery and intrigue, and also honestly one of the most fascinating dystopian, utopian-centered worlds that I've read in a while. I love this book. I feel like Neil Shusterman is just a genius. He thinks of such creative ways to basically shine the mirror back on society back at you and show you one of the most terrifying future states that he can think of. And it's so relevant, it's so topical, and it's just so creative and dark. Next up, I have a good old-fashioned ghost story to keep you up all night, and that is The City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. This is a story about a young girl who had a near-death experience and since then has been able to see and interact with ghosts. Growing up in the United States, our main character does encounter ghosts, but not to the extreme volume that she ultimately fears. What's interesting though is her parents are actually ghost like historiographers, and they have a show and a book series where they go and encounter extremely haunted places and talk about it. So at the beginning of the story, she actually moves to Edinburgh, the most haunted city in the world, for the summer. When she moves there, her interactions with ghosts not only exponentially increase, but she begins to realize that not all ghosts are nice, and she's forced to recognize and utilize her supernatural powers that she's been kind of suppressing for so long. This is just a good old-fashioned ghost story. We have a young girl utilizing her supernatural powers in a really eerie and dark city. On top of that, Victoria Schwab really calls to old fairy tales and superstitions to inspire this book, and it just feels like a really nice, easy novel that you'll find yourself just reading through all night long. It's so entertaining, and it has the perfect eerie ghost setting that is just amazing for this fall season. Next on the list, I have The Wizards of Once by Cassandra Crowe. This is actually a middle grade story that I just think is so creative and so dark, and has the creepiest illustrations that you will just be up all night reading it and trying to forget about it because it's kind of creepy. But this follows two main characters, Zar, who is a wizard, and Wish, who is a warrior, and these two groups of people have been fighting each other for centuries, trying to essentially destroy the other. However, Zar, our main character, does not have any magical powers, and he feels very ostracized by his community, and Wish encounters a magical sword, an artifact that is not only considered evil, but is entirely banned within her own community as well. These two characters cross paths, and they work together to destroy a dark evil that has kind of sweeping the land. This is a story that not only has the traditional very addicting tropes of witches versus wizards, but also has a lot of really fascinating dark magic and adventure. These characters also have to interact in ways that are hilarious, but provide also a lot of character growth that you ultimately really root for them. This is a charming but very dark story. It's also a pretty quick read due to all the illustrations that I found myself personally basically reading it in one setting throughout the night. I think this is just a perfect novel to pick up on a cool fall evening and just wake up and then it's morning and you read the whole thing, because it's just so entertaining and captivating. And the last book I'm going to talk about is probably the scariest YA book I have ever read, and that is The Diviners by Luba Bray. This book is so scary. I haven't read the sequel yet because I still think about some of the characters and I am too scared. That being said, this book is also incredible. It is set in the 1920s, and it is a multi-perspective story about a serial killer basically terrorizing this town and cities and many of the main characters, and actually one of the perspectives you read from is the serial killer himself. This is a novel that will really get under your skin. It's so well written and the story is absolutely so fascinating that you can't put the book down. I mean, it's a thriller, it's a mystery, you are dying to know what's happening next, but you're also terrified because you're forced to read through the eyes of the serial killer himself, and you're just wondering How and when are they gonna stop him? Because he's so scary. That combined with the time period, which I think is incredibly well done. I'm not actually usually a big fan of the Roaring Twenties setting, but I actually really enjoyed Libba Bray's rendition of this, as well as the characters themselves are so likable, which makes it even scarier because you don't want anything to happen to them. This is honestly, to me, the epitome of the title of this video, a book that will terrify you and keep you up all night, but also make you want to read the book all night as well. It fits in both categories perfectly, and if you have not read The Diviners by Libba Bray, I implore you to do so. Alrighty guys, that is my recommendation video inspired by Broken Things by Lauren Oliver. Be sure to check this book out as it is in stores now, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!